Alright, so before we get into tonight's stories, I just want to say, these came in over the past few weeks from people who actually submitted their experiences. And I don't say this lightly, but some of what you're about to hear genuinely unsettled me. Like, I had to take breaks reading through these. Rest areas. We've all stopped at them. Middle of the night, long drive, you just need to stretch your legs or use the bathroom. And most of the time, nothing happens. But sometimes the wrong person is already there waiting. Get comfortable. Turn the lights down. Let's get into it. Cassandra Pruitt had driven that same stretch of I-40 through Oklahoma probably a dozen times before the night everything changed. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep, 31 years old, covered a territory that stretched from Oklahoma City all the way out to Amarillo, and she knew those long flat drives better than most people know their own neighborhood. She'd done them at 2 in the morning in ice storms, in the kind of summer heat that makes the highway shimmer like a mirage. She was not someone who scared easily. That's important. That's the kind of person she was. It was a Tuesday in late October, around 11:15 at night. She'd finished a dinner meeting in Elk City that had gone long, and she was heading back toward OKC. The plan was simple: drive 2 hours, get home, be in bed by 1. She wasn't tired yet. She had a podcast going, had a coffee from a pilot station she'd stopped at 40 minutes earlier. Everything was fine. She pulled into the Clinton Service Plaza off I-40 because she needed to use the restroom. That's it. That was the only reason. It was one of those bigger Oklahoma Turnpike rest areas, the kind with a McDonald's and a travel store and actual lighting in the parking lot. Felt safe. It always had before. She parked toward the front, close to the building, and noticed there were maybe 5 or 6 other cars in the lot. A semi idling on the far end. A minivan near the entrance. Normal stuff. She grabbed her phone and her keys and went inside. The women's restroom was around the back of the building, past the food area. She went in, did what she needed to do, washed her hands. Took maybe 4 minutes total. She was walking back out through the main corridor when a man stepped into her path from the travel store aisle. He was probably mid-40s, medium height. He had on a gray zip-up hoodie and dark jeans, and he was holding a bag of chips like he'd just grabbed them off the shelf. He looked completely normal. That's the thing Cassandra kept coming back to later. He looked like a dad at a rest stop. He smiled at her and said, "Hey, Cassie." She stopped, because nobody called her Cassie except people from home. She'd gone by Cassandra professionally for years. She looked at him and said, "Sorry." He said it again. "Cassie. Long drive tonight." She didn't recognize him. She was certain of that. She looked at his face and felt nothing, no flicker of familiarity. No, yeah, I know you from somewhere. Just a stranger smiling at her using a nickname she hadn't heard in years. She said, "I think you have me confused with someone else." And she walked around him and headed for the exit. She was almost to the door when he said, from behind her, "Tell your mom I said hi." She stopped walking. Her hand was literally on the door handle. She turned around slowly. He was still standing there by the travel store aisle, still holding the chips, still smiling. And he said it again, quieter this time. "Your mom, Linda. Tell her hi." Cassandra's mother's name is Linda. She pushed through that door and she walked fast. Not running, because something in her brain was still trying to convince her this was explainable. She walked fast to her car and got in and locked the door. She sat there for a second with her hands on the wheel trying to think. How would a stranger know her nickname? How would he know her mother's name? She didn't have a name tag. Her car didn't have personalized plates. She didn't recognize him. She pulled up her Facebook on her phone. She had it set to friends only, but her profile picture was visible publicly. She thought, okay, What if this guy somehow recognized her from social media? But her mom wasn't even tagged in her recent posts. And even if he'd recognized her photo, that still didn't explain knowing her mother's name. She was spiraling. She called her mom. It was almost midnight, but Linda picked up after 2 rings, the way moms do when their kids call late. Cassandra described the man. Medium height, mid-40s, gray hoodie. Did that sound like anyone Mom knew? Her mom was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Cass, where are you right now?" Cassandra told her. Clinton Service Plaza on I-40. Her mom said, "Get back on the highway, right now. Don't go back inside." Cassandra asked why, and her mom said something that made the hair on her arms stand straight up. Her mom said, "Your aunt posted in our family group chat 2 days ago that you were driving back from Elk City tonight. She said the exact date and approximate time because she was asking if anyone could meet up with you." The family group chat. The one with 40-something family members in it. The one that Cassandra barely looked at. Private, theoretically, but 40 people is 40 people, and not everyone has the same security settings, and some people screenshot things without thinking. She asked her mom, "Who's in that chat that neither of us know very well?" Her mom didn't answer right away. And then she said the name of a man, a distant connection, someone her aunt had added maybe 2 years ago, a friend of a friend situation, and Cassandra said she didn't recognize the name. Her mom said, "He commented on your aunt's post. Said it was nice that you were coming through." Cassandra was already backing out of her parking space. She got back on I-40 and did not stop again until she was in the Oklahoma City metro area. She reported it to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol the next morning, gave them a description, told them what he'd said. They took the report. She never heard back about whether they identified him. But here's the thing she told me that I can't stop thinking about. She said when she was driving away, she looked in her rearview mirror. He was standing outside the entrance of the rest stop, not running after her, not waving, just standing there in the parking lot light watching her car leave. She said he was still smiling. She said it looked less like a rest stop encounter and more like something that had been planned. Like she'd shown up exactly where she was expected to be. And she was right, she had. She deleted herself from that family group chat the next morning. She changed her driving routes. She still does that stretch of I-40 for work, but she doesn't stop at Clinton anymore. Not ever. Strich man. Okay. I had to read that one twice when it came in because the detail about the group chat that's the part that got me. That's the part that explains everything and somehow makes it so much worse. Because it means it wasn't random. That's what people don't think about. We share so much information in spaces we think are private, and we forget who's in the room. Dark thought to carry into the next one, but here we go. Marcus Webb was a long-haul truck driver who ran a regular route between Louisville, Kentucky, and Columbus, Ohio. He'd been doing it for 6 years. 38 years old, solid guy, the kind of person who'd give you his last protein bar and not mention it. He knew his route the way musicians know their set lists. Every exit, every way station, every rest area. He knew which rest areas had decent vending, which ones smelled like something had died in the ceiling, which ones felt sketchy after midnight. The rest area on I-71 northbound near Dry Ridge in Grant County, Kentucky, he'd always thought it was one of the safer ones. Well lit. State police cruised through fairly often. It had that open layout where you could see most of the lot from the parking area. He'd pulled in there maybe 100 times without incident. This was a Wednesday in February, around 2 in the morning. Cold night. He'd picked up his load in Louisville around 10 p.m. and was making good time. He pulled into the rest area to log his break, eat his sandwich, and maybe get 20 minutes of shut-eye in the cab before finishing the run. Standard stuff. He parked in the truck section at the far end, killed the main engine, ran the auxiliary for heat. The lot had maybe 3 other semis and a handful of cars. He noticed a blue Toyota Camry parked under a light near the main building because it had been sitting there with the engine running when he pulled in. He barely thought about it. People keep their cars running in winter. He ate, dozed a little, woke up around 2:40, and decided to use the restroom before getting back on the road. He climbed down from the cab and walked toward the building, and as he passed the main parking area, he saw the blue Camry again. It was still running. Same spot. And now he could see there were 2 people in it. A man in the driver's seat, a woman in the passenger seat. The windows were fogged slightly from the inside. The woman appeared to be asleep, or at least her head was tilted against the window. The man was sitting up, facing forward. Marcus didn't think much of it. People sleep in their cars at rest stops all the time. He went inside, used the restroom, filled his water bottle at the fountain, spent maybe 7 or 8 minutes total. When he came back out, the Camry was still there, still running. He was almost back to his truck when something made him look back. He couldn't explain it exactly. Just that feeling you get when something's off and your brain registers it before you consciously understand why. He looked at the Camry, and now he realized what was wrong. The woman's head hadn't moved. Not at all. In 40 minutes parked there, sitting at a rest stop, your head shifts. You move. You adjust. Even deep sleepers move. But her head was in the exact same position against the window that it had been when he'd first pulled in. Tilted at the same angle. Same spot. And the man in the driver's seat. Marcus looked closer and noticed the man was staring at him through the side window. Not looking around the parking lot. Not on his phone. Looking directly at Marcus. Making eye contact. And not looking away. Marcus felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the February air. He kept walking to his truck, got in, and locked the door. He sat there thinking. Could be nothing. Could be a couple who'd had a fight and she was passed out and the guy was just watching the lot like people do when they can't sleep. That was a totally reasonable explanation. But he kept seeing that angle of her head. That stillness. He called 911. He told the dispatcher there was a couple in a blue Camry that had been parked at the rest area for over 40 minutes. The woman appeared to be unresponsive, and the man was behaving in a way that concerned him. He gave them the plate number. He'd memorized it the way truckers memorize things automatically. The dispatcher said she'd send a Grant County deputy. Marcus sat in his cab and watched the Camry. The man inside never stopped looking at his truck. For the entire 12 minutes it took the deputy to arrive, that man sat in the driver's seat and stared at Marcus's cab. No phone, no movement, just watching. The deputy pulled in and approached the Camry. Marcus watched from his cab. The deputy knocked on the driver's window. The man inside cracked it maybe 2 inches. There was a short conversation that Marcus couldn't hear. Then the deputy stepped back and spoke into his radio. Within 4 minutes, a second cruiser was coming into the lot. Marcus got out of his truck and walked close enough to where 2 deputies were now at the Camry. One of them saw him and told him to stay back. He did, but he could see the woman in the passenger seat. She was awake now, she'd sat up, and she was crying. And the expression on her face was not the expression of someone who'd been startled awake at a rest stop. It was the expression of someone who had been waiting for someone to show up. He found out pieces of it later. The woman had been reported missing out of Lexington by her roommate earlier that evening. The man was someone she'd met on a dating app 3 weeks before. She'd gotten into his car for what she thought was a dinner date that afternoon and had been in that car ever since. The deputies found zip ties in the glove compartment. They found her phone in the center console, turned off with the SIM card removed. The man had been sitting at that rest area with the engine running for over an hour. Whether he was deciding what to do next or waiting for something, Marcus didn't know. And neither did the deputies, at least not right away. But Marcus thought about it later. If she hadn't been sitting completely still like that, if something about that stillness hadn't bothered him enough to call, he probably would have driven away. She probably would have stayed in that car. He still runs that route. He still stops at that rest area. But he told me he looks at every car in that lot now. He looks at every passenger. He can't not do it anymore. He said, "I don't think I was looking for anything special that night. I just happened to look at the right time." Then he said, "I try to think about how many times I didn't look. That one hits different because of that last line. How many times didn't you look? I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. And so are you. Buckle in because the next one is a completely different kind of wrong." Nadia Flores was 26 years old when this happened. She just finished her second year working as a field botanist for a conservation nonprofit in New Mexico, and she spent most of her working life outdoors, hiking, cataloging plant species, working in remote areas without cell service. She was comfortable in the wilderness in a way most people aren't. She hiked alone, camped alone, drove long stretches of empty highway alone without a second thought. In July, she was driving back to Albuquerque after a 2-week field assignment near Carlsbad, heading northwest on US 285. It was late afternoon going into early evening, that long golden stretch of summer light that makes the desert look like it's on fire. She'd been driving for about 3 hours and needed to stop, so she pulled into a rest area between Roswell and Vaughn, one of those quiet, almost skeletal New Mexico rest stops. A small adobe-style building, a couple of covered picnic tables, a parking area, no vending machines, no other services, just a place to pause. There were 2 vehicles in the lot when she pulled in. A pickup truck with an out-of-state plate, Texas, and a white SUV with the New Mexico State Parks emblem on the door. A ranger's vehicle. She actually felt a small measure of relief seeing it. A ranger being present at a remote rest area felt like a safety signal. She parked, got out, stretched, used the restroom, which was around the side of the building and was, as expected, an experience. She came back out and was standing at the covered picnic table looking at her map because she wanted to figure out a better route that avoided some road construction she'd heard about on the radio. That's when the ranger came around from the far side of the building. He was a big guy, maybe 6'2", broad through the shoulders. Full uniform, tan shirt, dark pants, badge, the hat. He looked the part completely. He smiled at her as he approached and said something about the heat, small talk, and she responded normally. Then he asked where she was headed. She told him Albuquerque. He nodded and said he was just doing a check of the facilities, standard stuff. He stood there talking for a moment, and she didn't think anything was off until he asked her what she did for work. She told him botanist, field research, just coming back from near Carlsbad. And he said, "Oh yeah? What sites were you at out there?" It was a specific question, not the usual follow-up a person makes to be polite. Felt like he wanted coordinates. She mentioned one of the general areas, nothing specific, and he immediately asked a follow-up about the access roads. She said she didn't really pay attention to the road numbers and changed the subject, asked him how long he'd been stationed in this area. He gave a kind of vague answer, said he covered a lot of ground. She noticed his name tag but couldn't quite read it in the angle of the light. She started folding her map to signal she was about to leave. He took a small step to the side. Not aggressive, just repositioning. She started walking to her car and said it was nice talking to him. Have a good evening. He fell into step alongside her, still talking, something about the weather patterns in the area, very casual, very friendly. She got to her driver's door and he was still right there. She opened her door and he put his hand on the roof of her car. Not blocking her, not grabbing her, just resting his hand there, and continued talking. She got in, said goodbye, and he leaned down to the window level and said, "Drive safe out there. Long stretch before you hit anything." She pulled out. She drove for about 10 miles before she could really breathe normally. Here's where it gets bad. She called her supervisor when she got enough signal to make a call. Not to report anything specifically, just because she was unsettled and wanted to talk it through. Her supervisor, a woman named Greta who'd worked in New Mexico for 20 years, listened to the whole thing. Then she said, "What did the SUV look like?" Nadia described it. White New Mexico State Parks logo on the door. Greta was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Was the logo on both doors or just one?" Nadia hadn't looked at both sides. She'd only seen the driver's side. Greta said, "The state parks vehicles all have logos on both doors and on the tailgate, and they have a unit number on the rear quarter panel." She paused. "Did you see a unit number?" Nadia tried to remember. She hadn't looked for one. She'd just seen the logo and felt safe. Greta said, "I'm going to call the state parks office." 20 minutes later, Greta called back. No state parks personnel had been dispatched to or were assigned to that rest area that day. The nearest official who'd been in that vicinity had cleared the area before noon. Nadia filed a report with the New Mexico State Police. She sent them photos she had from her dashcam. She had a front-facing dashcam that had captured the white SUV in the lot when she pulled in. The state police told her the vehicle's logo appeared to be a decal, not the standard issued markings, and the vehicle itself didn't match any registered state parks fleet vehicle. They didn't catch him, at least not in any update she received. But a state police officer told her, quietly, that it wasn't the first time someone had reported a person in a convincing government-style vehicle at a remote rest area on that stretch of 285. What kept Nadia up at night wasn't the encounter itself. It was the question she couldn't answer. Why access roads? Why did he want to know the specific roads into the research sites? Was he looking to find a place where a person would be completely alone and completely expected to stay a while? She still does field work. She still drives those highways. But she told me she looked up what legitimate state parks vehicles look like. Logos on both doors, unit numbers, specific light bar configurations. She said, "I'll never see a Ranger vehicle the same way again." Then she said, "I almost didn't drive away. He was so normal. That's the scariest part. He was so completely normal. The fake authority figure thing. That never stops being terrifying to me because we are genuinely wired to trust a uniform. That's instinct. And some people know exactly how to use that. Let's keep going." This next one came in from someone up in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a different kind of fear entirely. Derek Tollison was 44 years old, a high school history teacher from Tacoma, Washington. He was driving down to Portland in November for a conference, something about curriculum development, he said, the kind of thing that sounds boring to everyone except the people who care deeply about it. He's not a particularly anxious person. He said he's the kind of guy who thinks most danger is overstated and that people let fear run their lives unnecessarily. He wanted me to include that, I think, because of what happened to him next. He was on I-5 southbound, maybe an hour and change outside of Olympia, when he stopped at a Washington state rest area. It was around 9:30 at night. November means it's fully dark by 5, so the lot felt darker than it probably would have in other months. There were several cars, a couple of semis. The rest area had that standard layout, the main building with restrooms, the sidewalk lighting, the grassy area with a few benches. He went into the men's restroom. It was a tiled state facility, the long kind, urinals on one side, stalls on the other. He went to the far stall, the last one, because that's what you do. He closed the door, latched it. He had been in there for maybe a minute when someone came into the restroom. He heard the footsteps, hard-soled shoes on tile. And then the person passed all the open stalls and the urinals and came directly to the stall right next to Derek's. The one immediately beside him, which should be an automatic social cue that you don't take when there are open stalls available. Okay, he thought. Weird, but whatever. Then the person sat down and didn't do anything. No sounds of someone actually using the facility. Just sitting there, in the next stall, quietly. Derek thought maybe the guy was on his phone. People do that. He looked down out of habit, the way you do, and he saw the man's shoes. Dark work boots. And the man's feet were pointed directly at Derek's stall. Not forward, the way they naturally fall. Pointed sideways, toward him. Derek felt the first real prick of alarm. He finished up as quickly as he could, flushed, and started to reach for the latch on his stall door. That's when the man in the next stall spoke. He said, "Hey!" Just that. Just hey. Derek said hey back, automatic, the way you do. The man said, "What kind of car are you driving?" Derek's brain did a hard stop. "What?" He said. "What?" The man repeated it. Calm voice, not aggressive. "What kind of car are you driving tonight?" Derek unlocked his stall door and stepped out. He crossed to the sinks, turned on the water. His heart was going fast, but he was keeping it together. He looked in the mirror. He could see the stall behind him. The man hadn't come out. He washed his hands faster than he'd ever washed anything. And then he heard the stall door open. The man came out and stood behind him. Mid-50s, weathered face. He was wearing a plaid flannel shirt and those dark work boots. He stood just slightly too close. He said, "You come from up north?" Derek looked at him in the mirror and said, "Just stopping for a minute." The man nodded slowly. "I've been waiting here a while," he said. "Looking for someone who's heading south." Derek dried his hands and turned around. He kept his body language as neutral as he could manage and said, "Can't help you," and walked toward the door. The man said, "You sure? Be good company on a long drive." Derek pushed through the door and walked to his car at a pace he would describe as faster than normal but slower than running. He got in, locked it, and immediately looked at the entrance of the restroom building in his rearview mirror. The man walked out about 30 seconds later. He stood outside the entrance and looked around the parking lot, scanning. He wasn't walking toward any particular car. He was just looking. Derek didn't start his engine. He knew if he started his engine, it would draw attention to his location in the lot. He sat completely still with his phone in his hand, screen dim, watching. His parking spot was in a row that had a couple of other vehicles between him and the building, so he was somewhat obscured. The man in the flannel walked slowly along the sidewalk in front of the building. He stopped at one car, a silver SUV, and appeared to look inside it. Then he kept walking. He went around the side of the building and out of Derek's sightline. Derek called 911 and reported it. He described the man, described the behavior, described the question. About what car he was driving. The dispatcher asked if he felt he was in immediate danger. Derek said he wasn't sure, but the behavior felt predatory. A Washington State Patrol trooper arrived in about 9 minutes. By the time the trooper arrived, the man was gone. No vehicle in the lot matched the description Derek gave. The trooper walked the area, checked the perimeter, came back and told Derek they didn't find anyone matching that description. He took Derek's statement, gave him a case number. Derek drove the rest of the way to Portland without stopping once. He told me that the question that stayed with him wasn't what the man had planned. He said the question that kept him awake was the thing the man said, "I've been waiting here a while." Not, "I need a ride." Not, "I'm trying to get to Portland." Waiting for someone. And he'd been doing it long enough that the duration was relevant. Derek said, he wasn't desperate. He wasn't in trouble. He was patient. He paused. Patience is scarier than aggression. Aggression means they're reacting. Patience means they planned. He said he thinks about that a lot. He told me he believes he was probably not the first person that man had asked that night. He just might have been the first one who didn't give him an answer. Patient. Yeah. That word is doing a lot of work there. Patience means they thought it through. That's what separates dangerous from desperate, and it's a really important distinction. Derek said it better than I could. Last one of the night, and I'll warn you, this one escalates fast. Submitted by a woman who I'm going to call Renata, because she specifically asked me not to use her real name. And after you hear what happened, you'll understand why. Renata was 29 and lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. She worked remotely as a UX designer, which meant she had the flexibility to move around, and that September she'd driven up to visit her sister in Cincinnati for a long weekend. She drove a dark gray Honda CR-V, drove it everywhere, had a little succulent on the dashboard and a ring magnet on the back that her college roommate had given her. Ordinary car, ordinary life. She left Cincinnati on a Sunday night around 7 o'clock. She'd stayed longer than planned, as you do at your sister's, and the drive back to Knoxville was about 4 hours on I-75 South. She was fine with it. She had an audiobook going. She'd eaten a big dinner. She was comfortable. She'd driven that route before. Somewhere around Williamsburg, Kentucky, around 9:30, she noticed a black pickup truck. Older model. She thought maybe late 90s or early 2000s. That was riding close behind her. Not tailgating aggressively, but close enough that she could see the front grille clearly in her mirror. She moved to the right lane to let it pass. It moved to the right lane too. Stayed behind her. She moved back to the left lane. It stayed in the right lane. Paced her. She sped up slightly. It sped up. This went on for about 4 miles. She was telling herself it was coincidence. Same exit coming up, maybe. Just someone driving the same speed. She took the exit for a rest area near the 11 marker south of Williamsburg because she'd been planning to stop anyway, and honestly because she wanted to see what the truck did. The truck took the same exit. She pulled into the rest area lot, parked near the front of the building, close to the main entrance. There were a handful of other vehicles. She watched in her mirror. The black pickup drove slowly through the lot. It didn't park. It drove through the lot all the way to the back near the truck section, and then pulled partially behind one of the big semis. Its headlights went off. She sat in her car with the engine running. Okay, the truck could be parking for the night. The driver of that truck could be a trucker who just happened to take the same exit. She'd been on the road for 2.5 hours and it was dark, and maybe she was wired from too much coffee and being anxious for no reason. She gave herself 5 minutes. After 2, the pickup's lights came back on. It pulled slowly out from behind the semi. Pulled forward, not to the exit, not to a parking space. It parked in the truck section where there was a direct line of sight to Renata's car. The lights went off again. She called her sister. She described everything, the truck following her on the highway, the slow circuit through the parking lot where it was sitting now. Her sister said, "Ren, go inside. Don't stay in your car. Go where people are." Renata said, "What if he follows me inside?" Her sister said, "Then you're around other people. Get inside." She took her keys and her phone, got out of her car quickly, and went into the rest area building. She stayed near the front area where a couple of other people were, a family with kids, an older man with a thermos. She felt immediately better with other humans around her. She watched through the large front windows. She could see her car. She could see across the lot to where the pickup was sitting. Nothing happened for several minutes. Then the pickup's door opened and a man got out. He walked slowly across the lot, not directly toward the building. He walked along the edge of the lot, the long way toward the building. Renata stepped back from the window but kept watching. He went into the men's restroom entrance on the side of the building. She exhaled. 2 minutes later, he came out of the restroom and stood outside for a moment, looking at the lot, looking at her car. He walked toward it. He stopped at her CRV and appeared to look inside the driver's window. Just stood there for a moment looking into her car. Then he looked up at the building, right at the big front windows, right at where she was standing. She backed up further. She went to the front desk. Most bigger Kentucky rest areas have an info desk, and she told the woman working there exactly what was happening. The woman immediately got on the phone. Renata didn't know if she was calling a supervisor, security, or 911, but she was making a call. The woman told Renata to stay right there. She did. About 6 minutes later, a Kentucky State Police trooper walked through the front entrance. The woman at the desk had called the state police non-emergency line and they'd had a trooper nearby. Renata told him everything. He asked her to stay inside and went out to the lot. She watched through the window. She saw the trooper approach the man who was now leaning against the side of his pickup. She saw the trooper talking to him, asking for ID. She saw the man's body language change. He stood up straighter, handed over something, crossed his arms. The trooper came back inside after a few minutes. He asked Renata if she knew a man with a particular name. He showed her his phone with the ID information typed out. She didn't recognize it. He said the man had a Kentucky license, lived about 40 minutes north, and his story was that he'd pulled off because he was tired and just happened to park near the semis. The trooper said he had no probable cause to detain him further, but then he told her to wait one moment. He went back outside and Renata watched him walk around the pickup truck. Not talking to the man, just walking around the vehicle slowly. He came back in. He said, "Your car, does it have a magnet on the back? Any distinctive sticker?" She said yeah, she had a ring magnet on the rear hatch. He nodded slowly. He said, "His truck has a Ring doorbell magnet on the back too. Exact same model." She stared at him. He said, "It could be coincidence. Or he might have thought it meant you were from the same community, the same neighborhood, something. Some people use them as a signal that they know the person has a ring system and won't." He stopped himself. He said, "I'm not sure what to make of it." The trooper stayed in the parking lot and watched while Renata got back in her car and got back on I-75. He stayed on the lot until she was out of sight. She drove the rest of the way to Knoxville without stopping. The next day, she took the magnet off the back of her CRV. She thought about it a lot, whether the magnet meant anything to him specifically or whether it was coincidence. She went down a long internet rabbit hole about whether certain bumper stickers or magnets get used as targeting markers. She didn't find anything definitive. She asked security people online, got different answers. She said the uncertainty is what got to her. not knowing if it was random or if she'd been chosen for a specific reason, not knowing if the magnet was Y or if it was just two people who happened to have the same magnet and one of them was dangerous anyway. She said, "I keep thinking about all the little things I put on my car without thinking, things that seem like nothing, and whether any of them say things about me I didn't mean to say." She paused. Then she said, "He knew which car was mine in a dark parking lot. He walked straight to it. He looked right through that window at me, and I will never know why he picked me in the first place." She said that last part very quietly, and I believe her when she says she thinks about it every single time she gets in her car. All right, that's tonight's collection. 5 stories. 5 real people. 5 moments that happened at ordinary rest areas on ordinary highways across this country. And every single one of them has one thing in common. It could have gone so much worse. A missed phone call, a different parking spot, not looking in the rear view at the right second. The margin is terrifyingly thin sometimes. If you've had an experience like these, something that happened at a rest area, a truck stop, a highway pull-off, anything like that, send it in. The link is in the description. These stories deserve to be heard. Be careful out there. Pay attention. And if something feels wrong, trust it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for trusting your gut. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next one.